Hello and welcome. I'm Laura Holton, your host and moderator for today's fireside chat with Valiantys, Atlassian, and special guest Forrester. Before we kick off, I'd like to just say a big thank you to you all taking the time to join us for modernizing ways of working in the cloud today. And we've given you a couple of minutes to all join in and settle on in, so hopefully you'll find this next 60 minutes very, very enlightening around cloud. So we've got a truly exciting session ahead of us that touches upon modernizing DevOps, DevSecOps, enabling new ways of working for your team, as well as learning how to best leverage value from your migration and what you should really expect from your migration partner. We've also got some great content for you to download and an exclusive treat for you at the end of the session, so stay tuned to learn more about that as we go. And to make sure we're helping you as best as we can with modernizing ways of working in the cloud, we have a chat box to source your questions, which is located to the right of your screen. And we'll also be hosting some key polls throughout the hour to help us deliver relevant and tailored answers to you and your fellow attendees. So keep an eye out for that too. But for now, feel free to drop any questions on the topic or share your struggles and experiences with us. We'll be collecting them in readiness for our live Q&A towards the end of the session. And for any left unanswered after the buzzer, then our terrific guest speakers will follow up individually with you. So don't worry about that. Now, last but not least, the biggest question of them all, yes, this session will be recorded and will be made available to you within the next week via email. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guests of the hour. Setting the scene for us and discussing cloud's past, present, and future trends is Lee Suster, Principal Analyst at Forrester. Next up, we have John Meyer, Senior Solutions Engineer at Atlassian, who will be tackling the transformational values of Atlassian Cloud solutions, particularly in comparison to server and data center. And to round us off is our very own Guilherme Giancondino, Valiantys' Head of Cloud Practice, discussing the tactics and strategies you need to consider when migrating to the cloud. Now, we've done our research over the past few months and talked to many of our customers and members of the Atlassian ecosystem who have helped us to capture key questions we've brought with us today and shared with our guest speakers. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's consider where cloud is now and understand where it's going. Lee, perhaps you can give us insight into this.
Well, thank you, and thanks very much for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity from Valiantys to be able to come and join you and to speak alongside Atlassian as well. The title of my talk is Cloud, DevOps, and the Modernization Imperative. And the imperative was deliberately chosen for emphasis because we believe that you can't simply assume that this is going to take care of itself. The time to move ahead is now. And we're going to talk through about some of the things that we're seeing in the field and about how organizations can move forward in their journeys. First, a little bit about me. I cover cloud for Forrester. I have been kind of a generalist position. I look at cloud in all directions, but with a particular focus on cloud native, Kubernetes, and transformation. I come out of the security space as well as the enterprise and cybersecurity architecture background as well. So what we'll talk about today is how cloud is not just a place, something out in the field. It's actually a new way of working, that modernization is not an option. It's actually essential, as I mentioned, and that you need cloud partners as part of this transformation. Very few people, if anyone, could do it on their own. So to step back a little bit, this is a diagram or something like it that many of us have seen many times before. A series of kind of vertical bars. Platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. And this model has been prevalent for some time in the early days of working on cloud, in that we saw that essentially a reproduction or an approximation of the traditional ways in which data center infrastructure was organized moved into the cloud. And this was, obvious and reasonable at the time. You needed to have some way of presenting the infrastructure that people had been working on to them in a familiar way. But it's actually very quickly became seen as an anti-pattern, or at least that's been our perspective here at Forrester. Because what really happened was first the wave of virtualization that took place in the data center, was transformative in the sense that it allowed infrastructure to be managed much more efficiently, resources to be used much more efficiently, much more efficiency in terms of productivity by any number of different players in IT infrastructure. But in a sense, it was refurbishing infrastructure that was already decades old, okay? And the question then became, as cloud started to mature, what is it going to be different about this underlying cloud infrastructure that will allow us to move away from the traditional ways of thinking about it? So we have a decades-old stack which we virtualized that created a lot of potential for greater productivity and speed of development and so forth. But the cloud itself was clearly, by amassing these enormous resources at cloud scale, global scale, opened the door for something different. So at Forrester, we've moved away from the old as-a-service model, whether it's software or platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, towards a series of services that are rather interlaced. So, some of them are cloud vendor managed, some of those are customer managed. So we talk about cloud infrastructure services. We talk about cloud database and analytics services. We talk about cloud development services. The cloud itself has become a platform for further development. And we talk about cloud applications, which is a way of describing software as a service, or SaaS-like platforms that are being provisioned to you and offered to you by the cloud providers themselves. So this new model of services, which is interlaced between, say, customer operated and managed services, is really the model that we're talking about today. And it's a new cloud ecosystem, one that moves away from the old stack, the x86 type formations that were replicated through virtual machines, into something much different from that. And so at Forrester, we've been describing for some time that cloud isn't a place, it's actually a way of working, that the IT boundaries are dissolving. Again, you had this stack in the data center, which was then virtualized, but still nevertheless reproduced many of the ways of working because of the fundamental constructs were still the same around virtual machines, to something very different now, because you're starting to have new architectures around containers and Kubernetes, orchestration at scale. You're talking about, with those types of platforms, you can have something that straddles on-premises and the cloud, where cloud actually becomes a new way of working. So hybrid, on-prem, and so on, those distinctions are starting to dissolve. And multi-cloud has become the norm for large organizations. So again, cloud isn't really a place. It's not putting something out in the public cloud and that's a new infrastructure versus something on-prem. You have cloud at customer types of offerings from the big cloud providers, and you have multi-cloud container platforms, which by design allow you to operate on premises or in the public cloud and use this as a target environment for development and as a common denominator for operations. And what that's done is put cloud scale and power in the hands of any, I would say, enterprise class, but even smaller organizations can actually take advantage of that. It's transforming the lives of both the operators and the developers in ways that are really powerful, which I think the other speakers will address. If we go on to the next slide, please. Now, this is a non-technical slide, intentionally so, because we can dive into Kubernetes, we can talk about functions as a service, we can talk about the latest open source projects and their transformative potential. We urge people to step back from some of those technical details and actually think about what it is you're doing and how you're going to amass the resources to get there. Obviously, you need cloud platforms, bottom corner on the left, right? Cloud platforms, your cloud vendors and the ecosystem around them are obviously fundamental, otherwise we wouldn't be able to even have this conversation. But you also have to change your practices. DevOps is, in some organizations, is kind of decreed into formation. Developers, operators, okay, get together and figure it out. It's not that easy. It does require a different way of working. There's a dynamic of tools and individuals and organizations that has to come together, and it has to be an organic process. So this type of cloud practice, various agile methodologies, people have their variations on them, but the important thing is that those old boundaries start to break down. An old sysadmin, kind of very kind of predictable, stable kind of operation on this old stack now gets away to something that in a cloud native environment around Kubernetes is very different, in which site reliability engineering and platform practices become really key. So that's important, cloud practices for developers and operators coming together in ways that make sense, for a given organization. And finally, partners. Partners can be defined. You can define them as it can be vendors, it can be consultants, they can be people who come and help stand things up on an architectural standpoint. There's any number of different ways that you could define partners, but we're going to have a dynamic around understanding that partners can be a much more widespread ecosystem of people to help enable. Sometimes they'll be people who will be long-term, sometimes they'll be people who will come in, perform that function, and move along. The question of partnerships, we think, is something that everybody has to take into consideration as they move ahead, but basically a qualitatively new form of IT infrastructure and development environments. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate, underscore that, we have cloud platforms, cloud practices, interoperate, and we have cloud partners that will move along a kind of continuum that both works internally in terms of how you actually provision, moving away from the old shared services ticket-based model to something much more dynamic and related to the business, to an external, customer-facing experience, however you define that, business to business and so on, and where you're able to be much more receptive to what you're bringing to the market or bringing in a government setting to citizen engagement. Next slide, please. So this question of service providers, I touched on it. As I mentioned, the service providers, the partners play an important role in this transformation. It could be around infrastructure. Some standing up Kubernetes can be challenging for the first time people do it. So those people who can come in and help establish an operating environment for those are very valuable at the platform level to enable platform operations. Technology experience as a product, people who are able to round out what's offered to both internal stakeholders as well as your customers. Oftentimes, you'll have a highly automated CI/CD pipeline that you'd like to bring into being, and you need to be able to make use of the best practices that are out there, essentially at the software factory, and bring that towards a given organization and adapt it properly. Partners can play, and service providers can play an important role there. Processes as a product, in other words, move away from the technical point solution and overarching, instead moving towards an overarching service that you're delivering. A universal and highly integrated observability stack. The more interactions you have between developers and operators in a more dynamic way, the more critical observability has to become up and down the stack. And of course, security. It's here last. It could be just as easily be first, because these environments involve different kinds of interactions of systems and data and users. Security needs to be integral to this, and the expertise that you can get from partners can be really critical in that regard. Next slide, please. And the point of doing this, after all, is enablement, right? Cloud accelerates innovation. It's looked at, as I mentioned earlier, cloud was a data center alternative, and it started to become an engine of innovation based at the kind of scale and flexibility that's there. And with the cloud native technology, you've got a new era of distributed architecture that's much more scalable, much more portable, on-prem, hybrid, and so forth, and now more recently the edge, and easier to manage at scale. Yes, you can manage your virtual machines in a convenient stack that people became familiar with, but you're talking about cloud scale internet global applications that are now in the hands of organizations that used to operate in much more narrow frameworks in technological terms, not so long ago. Now are operating with many of the same tools that the big cloud providers operate with themselves. And this level of new technological threshold or paradigm has become really important, and it's going to span from whatever data center or on-premise infrastructure you have or the edge into the public cloud. It's a new paradigm for IT, in short. Next slide, please. And modernization is really important, whatever business you're in, because the application development always needs more automation. You have to. The whole point of IT modernization is to enable development and get things out the door faster and more efficiently. And automation becomes key to that, the faster you have to go. So you need to have rapid speed, and you have to have reliability, and cloud native can deliver that. And this is true whether you're facing business to consumer or business to business in terms of applications. It's true both in both senses. We saw during the pandemic and the enormous stresses on the supply chain internationally that some of these B2B relationships were really critical, and cloud helped stabilize a lot of those operations and put them on a new footing as organizations responded to that crisis. Software stability is increasingly important in this scenario. Something goes wrong, it has a much far further reaching impact than it might have otherwise in the past. So stability is important. Cloud native can help provide some stability around that in terms of its resilience. Multiple software options are expected. Sometimes things have to run on premises. Sometimes they can't run as software as a service. So cloud native can help adapt all those things. And technology innovation is only going to further accelerate. So you need to have a kind of technological launching pad that's going to allow you to move along on an iterative basis and then maybe make some qualitative leaps as new capabilities come into play. Next slide, please. And those qualitative leaps, you can already start to see them. Things that were kind of whiteboard applications not too long ago are now there. Starting at the bottom of the stack, obviously with cloud native infrastructure, you can get better utilization. You can run clusters, Kubernetes clusters at scale much more efficiently than you did with VMs, have less of a footprint in terms of the hardware or VM input that you have, much more elasticity. Sometimes that elasticity can extend from on-prem to the cloud, as I mentioned. For developers, that's a completely new world. They can start to move away from particular development environments bit by bit and start to have whole domains of innovation, whether that's model ops, or in building pervasive insights, distributed trust, blockchain, coming into reality to where practical business and government applications make sense. And the developer world is further transformed as they move away from sort of line by line of code or assembling libraries and so forth into something that's more like service composability, delivering speed with quality, with a lot of scalability. So what an application developer does kind of moves up in terms of tooling and impact that it can have on our organization in a cloud native stack. Next step, please. So now to a minute about DevOps. I mentioned earlier that sometimes organizations decree these into being. Developers, operations go figure it out, go talk together. But really DevOps and cloud modernization go together. The movement towards DevOps preceded cloud in many ways, right? The move towards CI/CD pipelines preceded the mass adoption of cloud by some time. But as cloud was adopted at scale, the imperative of DevOps became obvious for many people, and it's still a work in progress. I think it's designed to be a work in progress. I think this popular rendition of what DevOps should look like bears a certain relationship to an infinity loop, and I think that's intentional because it never ends. It's a constant organic relationship between people who are kind of provisioning the infrastructure, making sure that it's reliable, making sure that it's scalable, making sure that it's portable when necessary, constantly in engagement with developers, and making sure that that's not just that kind of operations work isn't done in the abstract on kind of a ticket-based approach, but actually is much more organically linked to what the developers are doing, who are in turn much more engaged with whatever organizational units they're working with, a business unit, a government entity, serving citizens. Next slide, please. And we see in our numbers that high-performing organizations and DevOps go together. That high-performing organizations, as measured by a number of different indicators, show that forward-looking organizations are moving around DevOps or being much more successful in bringing to market what they need when they need to do it, and doing that at scale. You need to look at that. Next slide, please. And we see that developers are embracing Kubernetes and serverless very fast. And we think that Kubernetes and serverless is real indicator that cloud native is becoming the predominant infrastructure, certainly of any net new. Virtual machines in the old stack isn't going to magically disappear, but it's being modernized in many respects to adapt to this new world. And this is where the target environments are developing. So again, the need to get rooted in these new technologies around cloud native and embrace the organizational methods that enable that bring them to scale, like around DevOps, is really critical. Next slide, please. And again, DevOps, going back to the dynamic that we talked about earlier, cloud platforms, cloud practices, cloud partners. The DevOps has the same dynamic. It's really important. You can't have any one of these things is deficient or missing, the effort will founder. It's quite clear based on our experiences. The platforms have to be there. Unfortunately, they are of increasing maturity. That's arriving. The practices are evolving as people get their hands on these new technologies. And again, sometimes there are challenges there because they still have to manage the old stack and keep things moving and functioning as expected. But those practices are evolving when people are given the opportunity to engage with these new technologies. And there's an enormous amount of self-training going on, as well as organizations committing resources to making that transition. Next slide. And again, the question of partners are needed for transformation. Again, they can take different forms. They can be people who are kind of a point solution to help you stand up cloud security. They can be something that's ongoing. They can be people who can help stand up a CI/CD pipeline with sufficient security. A number of different roles, but we see that partners are really important right now because when you're at the beginning of a transition and you have people who are grappling with some of these challenges, you need people who are capable of generalizing best practices and helping them take root in a given organization. So those partners are key for that reason. Next slide, please. And the question of where does the cloud journey go next? This is, in a way, a kind of a trick question because the cloud journey almost never ends. Because when you look at the scale of the public cloud and how that's changing technology, clearly more and more resources are being amassed. So that there's a kind of a horizontal journey in terms of scalability, kind of that transition, but also when it's going further and further up, higher levels of functionality, greater interaction between a business unit, customer-facing organizations, and people developing software and people scaling the operations behind that. So it's a journey that actually never really ends. Next slide, please. And I'll just take a moment here to say thank you to Valiantys and all the people participating in this effort for inviting us here today. It's a great opportunity to present and hear the interaction and hear what my colleagues have to say.
Thank you, Lee. That was, you outlined some really good main benefits of DevOps from a broader perspective. Now I'd like to pass over to John, who hopefully can walk us through that topic from more of an Atlassian perspective. John, I'll let you share your screen.
Yep, awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is John. I'm on the solutions engineering team here at Atlassian, and today we're going to be talking about Open DevOps. So one of the, from talking to many customers that have migrated to the cloud, we realized that they're facing important decisions for their development tool chain. That is either choosing best of breed tools or an all-in-one suite. We've seen companies either consolidate all their tools to a single vendor or resign themselves to a disjointed best of breed tool chain. We found tool consolidation results in teams settling for good enough, but however, at Atlassian, even though we've built our own suite of tools that developers love, we believe that the best development tool chains require the flexibility to support multiple tools. That's why we've built Atlassian's Open DevOps. Teams that build software can focus on shipping value to their customers while we take on the complexity of integrating all of their tools together. So our mission is pretty simple. It is to build the world's most flexible, scalable, and open DevOps solution that helps software teams ship high-quality software faster. As you can see here, Open DevOps supports tools on all points of the DevOps toolchain spectrum. We have integrated our own tools into Open DevOps, but we also have strategically worked with third-party vendors such as Microsoft, GitLab, AWS, and Sneak, to name a few, to build seamless integrations into Open DevOps. In the future, we want to expand on this to include all the experiences and integrations that software teams use to get their work done. We believe that we can support teams by supercharging the delivery of software by providing them insights across the entire software development lifecycle. Some key callouts that I'd like to point out here that we intend to explore even further are testing, security, and observability. In order to solve these problems that our customers were facing, we built a few of our first core DevOps APIs. We had essentially decided to flip our integration model. We went from us at Atlassian managing integrations and providing webhooks with core partners to providing these core APIs for integration. Now, essentially, any of our partners, whether that be GitHub, GitLab, or CircleCI, or really any third-party provider, they can build against these APIs via the Atlassian platform. Lastly, the APIs are opinionated. We spent the time to model each of the data types you see here: dev info, builds, deployments, and feature flags. This means we are able to store them in a structured way, but also means that we could maintain ownership of the experience in product. So regardless of what tool our customers were using, they all had a consistent experience that embeds seamlessly within their workflows. When creating a new open DevOps Jira project, you'll be able to connect your various DevOps tools together. From the connection screen, you can select to create new containers to link to your Jira software project. In this example, you can see that we're creating a new GitHub repo as a part of this process. This is a pattern we tend to expand on as we add more integrations that work with open DevOps. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible to connect your tools together with one another. So how do we get there? What we're trying to do is simplify the tool chain. So we understand that the majority of the Atlassian customers are using Jira as the backbone. So we are making it easy as possible to connect those tools into Jira. So now if you are to go into a Jira software project, you'll see a new tool chain option that allows you to plug and play certain tools within the DevOps spectrum. You no longer have to go searching in the Atlassian marketplace or searching through docs of the third party. All of that information is found directly within Jira. We want to go deeper within the existing categories. So we want to make it even more compelling to connect other tools that will act as the center of gravity for open DevOps. And we also want to go broader with new categories. So we want to have a complete tool chain that leverages our key partnerships. So we are working strategically with other software vendors to make sure that if they are integrating these tools into open DevOps, it is a seamless experience for our customers. So according to a commissioned Forrester consulting study conducted on behalf of Atlassian and Amazon Web Services, the total economic impact of Atlassian Open DevOps, which was a composite organization created from Atlassian customers that have already adopted Open DevOps, developer productivity increased by up to 20%, contributing nearly $16 million in benefits over 3 years. Also, 1.5 hours per day of developer productivity was saved. IT productivity also increased by up to 10%. Software licensing costs per employee decreased by up to 30%. Deployment frequencies increased, and code quality has improved by 10% over that time span. So our customers that have already integrated their tools into Open DevOps and are using this today have experienced great benefits from doing so. If you'd like to try Open DevOps today, it's available to try free using this link. Existing customers can try it and start integrating their other DevOps tools into their toolchain.
That's great. Thank you, John. It's clear that to be able to leverage all those benefits that you've just outlined, you must first migrate to the cloud. So considering this, Guilherme, could you share some insights on how best to choose this migration approach?
You should be able to see my screen now. When we're talking about cloud migration strategy in general, it's very important to mention that choosing the best one is a key factor to the overall success of the migration. And that strategy, alongside with the business objectives of the customer, are the two main drivers of the final perceived value of the overall migration process. And in the following slides, I'll present a comparison about 4 different options or approaches on how to migrate to cloud. Also adding 2 other layers to it, One is the cost, and the other one is the timeline. And the main reason is because we usually hear our customers asking those two main questions. So how much it will cost, how long does it take, right? So I thought it would be a really good idea to kind of bundle it together, right, to compare those options. So the very first one is the greenfield, and it's not necessarily a migration strategy, as you actually won't migrate any data. It means to start fresh in a cloud environment. But the only reason I actually added it to the presentation is that we've seen some road teams within companies starting to use the cloud on their own. So like they are not necessarily leveraging the on-prem environment that they have, or they don't need the data they stored there. So they just start fresh in the cloud, which is kind of like to test it. And then they kind of become a catalyst for the company in general, like a catalyst for the transformation. Because other teams are looking into what they're doing, they kind of like the reports that they're seeing or producing, and then it turns into something greater. And if we look at the value added to this approach, of course, is not high because there's no migration happening here, but it can result in a greater migration project in the long run, right? The other one is by far the most common one, is the lift and shift. So it pretty much means just bringing everything from on-prem to cloud in a single go. And we usually see it being applicable in scenarios where there's a need to move to cloud as soon as possible. And the data set that needs to be migrated is not that complex. So it's either not that large, not that many data need to be migrated, or for example, we don't have that many apps involved, for example. If we compare those two, we see more value in the lift and shift one because you're actually performing a transformation. You're moving to cloud, and then the end users will be able to leverage all the benefits that the cloud provides, right? But it's not necessarily ideal since you might be bringing over a lot of old data or unused data, right? To kind of tackle that in a specific way, we have the other one that is the cleanup and shift, and it does pretty much what it says. Is first you clean up the data in the on-prem environment, or you will assess exactly what needs to be moved and what will remain in the on-prem environment. Of course, to do that, the timeline can't be that critical because you need time to do that assessment, right? And it's clear also that there's more value related to it because if you compare at least to the lift and shift one, because you'll be migrating only what's needed, right? But there's a twist here because you'd still may be bringing over old processes or unoptimized processes in the cloud. And we kind of seen that happen a few times. So like, oh, customer migrated to cloud and okay, all my problems are solved. But actually, as the time went on, they identified that there were a few processes that were not necessarily working properly. And then we engaged with them to kind of re-implement those processes, right? And then at the end, we have the transformational type of migration or strategy. And this is the one that we do see like the best success rate across all the other options. And also is the approach that we understand that delivers the highest amount of value possible. And the reason behind it is that here we're talking about actually re-engineering processes while moving to the cloud. And an example of that is a customer that engaged with us initially complaining about how hard it was to manage Jira. They had a really, really large environment with a bunch of configuration items, a bunch of workflows, mostly unused configuration items or old ones. They had Jira running for like 12 years, maybe more than that. And since we identified that there was like an overarching initiative that was led by the global PMO on migrating to cloud, we engaged with them in a transformational migration and redesigned the processes in a standardized fashion, right? So by doing so, we also proposed a structure that leveraged the enterprise cloud offering of having offering feature of having multiple child instances. So after going through all of that, they went from like a monolith solution, really old with a bunch of old data, to a distributed and scalable solution where we use those child instances to, for example, provision an instance specifically to the North American team, an instance specifically to the EMEA team, and another one to the folks in Latin America. All of them aligned with like a master instance, for example, like the organization one. And on that process of standardization, we also considered their process of moving to agile scale or scaling agile, and we created that in a way that the workflows were compatible with Jira Line. So that's a really good example of a real transformation, and that's why we're sure that this is the approach that extracts the full potential of the cloud. And just to kind of wrap things up, you might have noticed that from the different approaches, the dollar bill emojis, they grow in a linear fashion. And here on the transformational one, the value kind of jumps. And that is just to demonstrate that we really see an exponential difference in value when moving to cloud with a proper redesign process or like re-engineered process. And we usually enforce our customers on that specific approach or recommend that because moving to cloud is usually a one-time thing. So why not do it in the best way possible, right? And kind of to just put it in perspective, imagine if for this specific customer that I mentioned, if we just move them using lift and shift, there wouldn't be that much value at the end. They would just be moving a monolith to the cloud, right? And then maybe they would need to spend a lot of time afterwards trying to re-engineer or maybe even spend more money than the actual migration cost itself, right? So yeah, just wanted to leave you guys with this. And back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Guilherme. I'm going to pause here for just a moment and launch our next poll. So everyone should be able to see that following on. So John, whilst everyone's just finalising their poll, to kick off your next part of your presentation, hopefully following on from Guilherme's touches on Cloud Enterprise's main functionalities, can you share some more insights into the other features and what's that roadmap's looking like?
So thank you for that. Today we're going to be continuing to talk about the Cloud Enterprise offering that Guilherme brought up, as well as we're going to be talking about our roadmap for the Atlassian Cloud. So right now, 95% of new customers start in the Atlassian Cloud. On top of that, thousands of our server customers have already moved over, and in just over the last year, server to cloud migration rate has increased by almost 50%. As of this past quarter, we now have over 200,000 organizations using our tools in the cloud. As we've discussed today, many are aware of the advantages of cloud, but it's worth highlighting some of the key values of the Atlassian Cloud. It scales with your needs, it is faster to set up, and it's much easier to manage. But the one thing that is most compelling in the cloud is that it allows your teams to focus their time, energy, and resources on your core business. You get to choose how you spend your time on the things that are mission critical for your business and your customers. We now have an Atlassian Cloud offering that's just right for customers across every company size, industry, as well as geography. Today, we will focus specifically on our Cloud Enterprise offering, which is designed to help you scale and standardize Atlassian products across your enterprise. So the Atlassian Cloud Enterprise offering offers all of the functionality that's available in the standard and premium offerings, but on top of that, it offers unlimited instances. So you're not only just tied to one Jira instance, one Confluence instance. You can have unlimited instances in the cloud. You have a 99.95% service back SLA. You have SAML SSO, which is included with Atlassian Access. So that is a separate product, but with Enterprise, it comes included. With Atlassian Access, you also get automated user provisioning via your identity provider. We also have an organization-wide audit log, so you no longer have to go into these specific applications to see where are people logging in from, where are these API calls being made from. You have this audit log that is visible and works across your entire cloud footprint. We also have enterprise support, so we have teams specifically designed to support you with different SLAs than some of our other plans. And recently, we also have introduced HIPAA compliance for the enterprise plan, as well as Atlassian Analytics, which give you insight into all of your instances and allow you to connect with some of your favorite BI tools, which we'll discuss here in just a second. So, as I mentioned, our current set of in-product dashboards and contextual insights do a good job of meeting the needs of individual teams. However, as customers have started to standardize Atlassian products across their org, their needs have evolved. They need to perform more advanced analysis, combining data across multiple products, instances, as well as using their own custom metrics and calculations. To meet this need, you can take advantage of a new set of custom analytics capabilities built natively inside Atlassian that will speed up decision-making as well as help you blend that data across multiple teams and Atlassian products. With the acquisition and integration of Chartio, an enterprise-grade BI tool, we now give you the power to analyze your data your way, either by customizing pre-built dashboards or creating new ones with a no-code, low-code editor. You can even query your own operational, financial, or customer data for end-to-end access to be able to view that directly within the product. And to help you get near real-time insights, we have built this custom analysis on a layer model, on a fully modeled data lake. So we've started that investment with Jira software, but now it will also include Jira Service Management and Confluence as well. And eventually, all of the Atlassian Cloud product data will be available inside of the data lake. For data analysts who need the flexibility to build executive level reports and the BI tool of their choice, we are planning to build standardized connectors that make it easy to export the fully modeled data lake directly into your BI tool of your choice or infrastructure. So as I mentioned previously, one of the benefits of Cloud Enterprise is it allows you to scale globally. So if you're in a situation that suits itself to multiple instances, then there are three primary advantages of the Cloud Enterprise plan. First is centralized user billing, which allows you to pay for a user once and grant them access to multiple instances. With the premium or standard plan for comparison, you need to license that user separately for each instance. This offers substantial cost savings as a single enterprise plan seat costs much less than 2 premium seats. So if you are a single Jira user, you can pay for that user once and they can access the corporate Jira instance, the acquisitions Jira instance, security Jira instance, etc. One of the second benefits is managing custom instances for different teams can be challenging at the admin level. So we've created and invested in a centralized admin console to maintain security and compliance across the entire org. So admins will have visibility into everything that's going on with those instances. They can apply security policies, get usage insights, as well as take care of billing all in one single spot. And lastly, with Cloud Enterprise, you can customize each environment to the teams or their business requirements it supports. So let's say you need a marketplace app, but only one team needs that for a handful of users. They can have their own separate site and they can purchase that app just for their user base instead of paying for that app for the entire organization. From there, data residency is also included in Cloud Enterprise. So for each of your cloud sites and their products, you get to determine where exactly that data is hosted. So currently, I believe the realms are, we have the global realm, meaning you decide where it's best to host your data. You can also pin it to either the EU, so we can make sure that your data stays in the EU. We can pin it to the US as well as Australia as well. And soon we'll be coming out to support other regions as well. So as shown in one of the previous slides, Atlassian Access is included in Cloud Enterprise. Atlassian Access is a user management and security solution for the Atlassian Cloud, designed to help you easily manage and secure your users at scale, regardless of which of the Atlassian Cloud products they're using. We've partnered with 5 of the largest identity providers to support SAML SSO, and I'm pleased to announce that the integrations with Google Cloud Identity, Microsoft Azure AD, ADFS, and others are being widely used. We also support API-based integration to build your own seamless integration into Atlassian Access. Lastly, we have recently enabled the ability for enterprise cloud users to utilize multiple identity providers. This has been widely requested feature for our largest customers. So if you have some business units that use Azure AD, some that use Okta, that is now possible with Cloud Enterprise. We also have an admin hub, which allows you to have a centralized place for billing and user access. So here is where you can see your current instances, you can see the usage on each, as well as add brand new products from a single pane of glass. We also have organization insights that allow admins to understand how each product is being used. They can see their user count that's being used versus what they're paying for, and they can just generally see activity over time. This will enable admins to advocate for the value and ROI provided by their investment and make the most use out of the licenses that they are currently paying for. So we also do have a public cloud roadmap. So if you're curious about what is coming up in the future with Cloud Enterprise, we have a roadmap that is publicly available that allows you to see some of the newest features that are coming to the cloud. When we surveyed enterprise customers back in 2018 and asked for their feedback about what features would be needed for them to move to cloud, we came back with a top 50 list that we have used to guide our investment in the cloud. At the time of the survey, cloud covered 9 out of the 50 requests. These were very big blockers that we had to take action on if our customers were going to be successful on the Atlassian cloud. Well, our teams have been working hard, and fast forward today, and you can see that many of these 50 requests have either gone live or are currently underway. The key message to take away is that we have been listening to our customers, the challenges that they're having, and we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that the cloud product is viable for them and that there aren't any blockers. This year in particular, we have delivered some highly requested items such as HIPAA compliance, and in the near future, we're working on new features such as the ability to rename epics inside of Jira so that customers can adhere to the scaled agile framework. So those are just some of the features that have been requested upon and are coming to the product. One thing to also note is that we do have a new program called Point A. Point A is our program and leadership team through which Atlassian executes new product strategy. So it is a framework for us to deliver products to our customers via a beta phase. So current customers are able to test out some of the newer products that are coming to the Atlassian cloud and also see some of the products that are in alpha that are coming down the pipeline. So this is a brand new program where we're able to interface with our customers and get their feedback before products go live. And if you are contemplating or are nearly ready to migrate to the cloud today, there are migration tools, resources, as well as support as a part of the Atlassian migration program. Our partners like Valiantys have already helped move some of our largest customers to the Atlassian cloud, and they're prepared to help future customers as well.
Thank you, John. So understandably, that kind of migration is easiest done with a partner due to the complexity of it all, if you take into consideration everything that's been shared so far on the webinar. So as a final point to round us off, Gimme, how can a partner support a migration to the cloud for an organization and team?
Sure, I'll try to go quickly through my presentation. Let's just share my screen. You should be seeing it now.
Yeah, you're live.
Awesome. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, for sure. Enterprise migration is one of the most complex types of migration, and there are a few different ways in which a partner can support. It's either providing that extra capacity that is needed in case the team doesn't have it, or that deep knowledge and expertise to kind of accelerate the overall migration, plus all the other reasons that Lee already mentioned in his presentation, right? But in any case, it's always recommended to involve a solution partner and also involve the partner as early as possible in the process so that they can, support the customer from the initial transformation discussions all the way to the go live in the cloud and beyond. So on the next slide here, we have just kind of like a journey, or at least a condensed version of a journey to cloud. And I'll be talking about each phase real quick, starting with the strategy. That's pretty much the one that I've already mentioned in my previous presentation to define what is the migration approach. But something that we also help our customers with on that specific phase is on building a proper cloud business case to get that initial leadership buy-in that is so crucial to the success of the overall migration. And to help them build that business case, we usually leverage some really cool or really amazing resources, such as the Forrester report that John mentioned earlier. And if you're interested into looking more or learning more about it, you should be able to access that resource from the webinar resources page or headset page. Moving forward with the next slide here. Oh, froze? No? Okay. We have the assessment, and that's one of the most important phases. It's pretty much where the partner will dig deep into the configuration of the environment to get a better understanding, and based on that, build the best solution possible. As part of that assessment or that assessment phase, the two main topics or the crucial topics that the partner would usually go deep in is the user management and the app migration process. So talking specifically about the app migration, the goal for any partner when doing that assessment is to migrate with as little impact as possible, right? So since there's differences into how apps operate on-prem and cloud, there could be a clear path for migration or simply no cloud version of a specific app. And if that's the case, the partner would usually work with the app vendor to come up with a way to migrate the data over, or recommend an app that kind of replaces that functionality. So after going through the assessment, it's time for the actual execution. And usually the migration execution is done first on a staging environment, mapping all the possible issues and fixes, and then actually executing a proper production rollout afterwards. That can either be, all at once or a phased rollout, doing per project, Jira first, Confluence after, or maybe a batch of projects first, second batch, or waves, for example. All will depend on the customer scenario, right? And finally, once everything is done and it's live in the cloud, we usually provide enablement and training for our customers and users so that they can properly use the tools in the cloud. And it's also very important to mention that migrating to cloud is not necessarily the end of the road. There are a lot of aspects that we are helping our customers after migrating. It can either be helping them with their agile journey, or adopting agile at scale, or maybe improving the DevOps workflows. Either way, our main goal is to always build that long-term relationship and become that trusted partner that keep supporting our customers in achieving their strategic objectives. Always aiming also to extract the most value that the cloud can offer. And just to wrap up real quick, just kind of like a remember and final note, you may have seen this quite often lately, but just to mention that February 2024 is right around the corner. It's kind of crazy to think that it's been already 2 years since the announcement of the server sunsetting, and now we only have a few quarters left. So now more than ever, it's important to remember to plan your migration. Start planning it as soon as possible, since a migration can go for either 6, 12 months or even more. And talking specifically about the partner perspective, there's a topic related to the capacity of those solution partners. And this is something that was pointed out by a colleague of ours in a blog post that we recently published. This is also part of the resources of the webinar. And the bottom line here is that partners have a finite capacity at any given time. And if, for example, most organizations decide to move to cloud in a single time frame, this can turn into a real challenge, right? So remember to reach out to your solution partner as soon as possible and start discussing your cloud migration so that you can ensure that it's like a smooth journey. And yeah, that's it. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Guilherme. And thank you so much to both yourself, Lee, and to John for joining us, and to everyone else who stayed with us a few minutes over the time. We're going to pause the topic there. We've got some questions that we've had in the lead up to the event and some throughout the webinar. So that will be followed up after we've finished this off, we've closed it out, and both our speakers and ourselves will get back to you with the handouts, the slides, the recording, and a little note as to what the treat was behind the scenes. We also had live scribe Hannah Williams from Scribble Inc. With us today, and if I can just get it up, I can show you a very sneak peek before you disappear off for the afternoon. So what's been happening on my screen is that she's been capturing all the key takeaways and bite-sized information from Lee, John, and Guilherme across the day, and popped it into an easy bite-sized piece of content that you guys can take away to your team, to your organization, and this will be shared once finalized with yourselves. So keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. And yeah, that's what's coming to you sometime soon. But other than that, I will leave everyone to go and enjoy the rest of their day, whether it's morning, afternoon, or nearly evening with you guys. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and thank you to Lee, John, and Guilherme again for joining us on our panel today around modernizing ways of working in the cloud. It's been great to have you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.